So this morning I gave the talk focused on the how to open the lotus, and there's one part of that simile which I felt that I never emphasized fully enough, and that is that if you are that lotus at various stages of opening, or you may feel that you're fully closed, you're just starting the spiritual path of meditation, just beginning the practice of the Eightfold Path. Nevertheless, it gives you the confidence that inside of you are the jhanas. It's a good metaphor, that inside of you they're already there. You don't have to construct them. You just open these coverings out, and once those outermost petals are open, that's what you experience. It's not what you do. It's just what happens when you let go. Many years ago I called them very deep states of letting go. It shows you have let go of your body, only temporarily, but that's a wonderful thing. You have let go of time. You have let go of this inner commentary called thought. And you have let go of the breath. During the interviews I was also emphasizing that one of the reasons why the breath is a very, very common form of meditation is because it happens naturally. Even if you've never heard of breath meditation of its various stages, sometimes that when you get very peaceful, then the breath is the last thing moving before the body vanishes. And I think I mentioned to a few people, that's why I call it a stepping stone. When you cross the river is too wide for you to cross in one leap. So you go to this stepping stone in the middle, and from there you can step fully over to the other side of the river. And that stepping stone is the breath, and the reason why it works, it's the last thing moving. And of course, the heart is always also moving, and a few people have asked me during their interviews, what happens instead of the body is vanishing, and instead of seeing the breath coming in and going out, suppose you're seeing your heartbeat. And of course, you all realize that if you calm your heartbeat down, then you're going to die. So it is not a very good thing to watch. And if you are aware of your heartbeat, then I think I mentioned in the question time, please imagine this metaphor, this simile of watching a screen, and the breath is in the middle of the screen, the heartbeat is on the edge of the screen. And it's just the nature of when you are still and focusing happens. You won't even call it focusing, put it zooming in. If you zoom in on something, then what's on the edge of the screen vanishes, and what's in the center of the screen takes prominence. And that's how we deal with things like a heartbeat occurring while you're watching this breath. Keep the breath in the center, heartbeat on the edge, and it will soon, all by itself, fall off the screen. If you think that the breath is the heartbeat is an obstacle, if you try to get rid of the heartbeat, you are actually taking that as the most important object and putting it in the center of your screen. That's why it won't go away. Keep it on the edge and the breath in the middle, and then soon the heartbeat will go away. And because you do this, then the thing with the breath, which is different than the heartbeat, is as you're watching the breath, as you calm down more and more, you need less oxygen, So the breath does change, it calms down, it gets more peaceful. And as you're aware of it more, it does become more joyful, more beautiful. And because it keeps becoming more beautiful, more joyful, you can't take your awareness away from it. When I have watched my heartbeat, I've never managed to perceive a beautiful heartbeat, but I have seen many, many times beautiful breaths. And so it's more easy to use, to leave the body behind and go into the realm of the mind, which is one of the great purposes of this meditation. But when I say that all those meditations, those jhanas are right inside of you, it's not something you get from over there and take and put into your heart. It's not something you're missing right now, it's there. Just when you let go and unwrap this body and mind that bears your name, then this is what you come up with. Just you see nimittas. And in those nimittas they will take you, again another stepping stone, into the jhanas. And the very fact that I say that in each one of you, you already have a jhana, is something you uncover, not something you attain. By letting go of other things, this is what remains. And when I say that, it should give some confidence and inspiration that you can do it. There's too many people feel these jhanas, the Buddha called them uttari manusa Dhamma, really superior human states. They're amazing, they're powerful, they're magnificent. And even as I mentioned, the joy, what you experience, the object of your meditation, if you would like to say, in the first jhana is Sambodhi Sukha. If that doesn't inspire you, I'm not sure what will. This is the joy, the sukha, the happiness of enlightenment. You are not enlightened. But the Buddha said that because it's close enough. You get a taste of enlightenment. So these things, when they really happen, they inspire you. And this is one of the topics I haven't mentioned enough. How you use inspiration to take you into deep meditation. Very many times I listen to talks from someone like an Ajahn Chah or other monks, and sometimes it was such beautiful teachings. You felt so uplifted. You felt like you were watching the first performance of Tchaikovsky's 1812 or something. Or I don't know, 1812 is a bit too violent. But some beautiful performance. You're seeing it, hearing it yourself. And it's so amazing, so wonderful. You get all this beautiful energy coming up. Inspiration came many times from talks by these great teachers. And when I was inspired, sometimes tears would come out of your eyes. And hopefully that you're not afraid of that inspiration. There's two other places where I get inspired to the point that I can't help but crying. Not out of sadness or depression, but the mind is really uplifted. It's a natural phenomena. It's tears of joy, inspiration. And if you want to know what those places are, the two places where I just can't help but crying. The first of those is on the Vulture's Peak. If ever you go there and you can walk to the Vulture's Peak, where the Buddha spent many, many, many hours, days meditating. To me that was more powerful than even a place like Bodh Gaya. And the reason was because it was simple. It's what I felt, the Buddha, a great being, where he would like to stay, much more than any sort of constructed building. I remember when I first went there, it was very easy to see why it was called the Vulture's Peak. I don't know if you've ever seen this. This was many years ago. There was a rock on the outside, and it was shaped like a vulture with two wings on either side. But the last time I went there several years ago, I'd seen it already been cracked. Probably too many tourists and taking relics back to their temples or wherever. But nevertheless, inside there you could get a feel for this beautiful place, a cave, where the Buddha actually sat meditation. I think many of you have told me that you have the opportunity to stay in caves here in Sri Lanka, which are a couple of thousand years old. Once, and this was a time before I was well known. When I wasn't well known, I could go to those caves as well and no one would bother me. Now I just can't do that anymore, I realise that. But I remember spending a night in the cave close to Mahintale and seeing the carvings on the outside, the date when it was built. It was so simple, just a rock to sleep on. But I couldn't sleep, not because the rock was hard, but because I was inspired. You started to contemplate how many arahats have actually stayed in this cave over 2,000 years. It was about 2,000 years old. And I thought it was not correct to sleep. I actually did go to sleep eventually, I confess. But when I sat there, wow, there's so much good energy coming up because of that inspiration. You were just following in a line of great beings. And you can still feel like their energy, the energy of their meditation soaked into those rocks. I love that. And imagine, not just an arahat, but the Buddha himself. You could sit down in the Vulture's Peak cave and just let go and just get this amazing inspirations. And that's where you just started crying. Of bliss. But of course I did want to make sure that I used a brain which was quite well trained to check out, was this permissible, was this appropriate to cry as a monk? And then, of course, you found that was one of the forms of piti, the joy, when tears start flowing down your eyes. And that's also sometimes when you hear a great talk that happens. I remember one forest monk who gave a talk, I liked it so much, and at the end of the talk he noticed there was tears coming out of my eyes, and he said, "Oh, Ajahn Brahm liked that talk, didn't he?" Yes. But the other place, strangely enough, was in Sanat. That's where the Buddha became enlightened. Where he gave his first talk. And in the museum is one of my favourite Buddha statues, the Dhammacakka Buddha statue. And the first time I visited the museum outside Sanat, there was no guides to tell me where to go, no directions, no map, so I had to explore it by myself. And I remember, for those of you who know where it is, you enter and you go down the main passageway, you turn left, and I think there's another left turn, and you find this gallery, at the end of which is the Dhammacakka Buddha statue. It took me totally by surprise the first time. As soon as I saw it, the tears started to flow. Now I'm not quite sure why that happens. Something triggered sort of the tears. And I was just so inspired. When I visited there with disciples the second time, Second time I was prepared. And I told all the disciples I was bringing there, just round this corridor, there's a statue of the Buddha, one of the most beautiful statues I've ever seen. I said, last time I burst out crying, and this time I've got lots of tissues in my pocket. And I'm going to try and restrain myself. So as soon as we turned round the corridor, I could not stop it. I was not embarrassed because I knew this was a wonderful joy. And the third and last time I went there, this time I said, this is going to happen to me. I accept it. I'm not going to try and stop it like I did last time. So if I start crying, please leave me alone. It's joy, inspiration from this, what I still think is one of the most beautiful Buddha statues I've ever seen. Especially when you get there and you see it face to face. So anyway, we turned round the corner, and then I was ready to cry. But then there was a big tarpaulin over the Buddha statue. There was a workman was painting the ceiling. They were doing renovations. And I thought straight away, oh no, I've come all the way from Australia, all the way to India, to Benares, and now to the museum. I told everyone about this, and the thing is covered up, I can't even see it. That taught me about expectations. I was looking forward to something which caused bliss inside of me, but it was all covered up. I realized my mistake. You can't expect anything in this world. Even when you meditate, you may think you're getting close. Don't expect anything. So I acknowledged my lesson. And as soon as I thought that, the worker, who couldn't understand English, he was a local Indian. The worker looked at me. Without any instructions, he took off the tarpaulin. And I started weeping again. These are things which inspire you, but I know what to do with that inspiration. Once it's there, you try and find the most secluded spot you can, and you cross your legs. It doesn't have to have a nice cushion under your bottom. It doesn't have to be perfectly quiet. Any place I can just close my eyes and no one bothers me. And use that inspiration to start your meditation. And then the meditation is so easy. You sit down, close your eyes, and the breath is just right there, almost immediately. You don't have to worry about the body. That inspiration is a mental energy. And that mental energy becomes so strong, the mind is really powerful, and it's just there. You watch the delightful breath, and then nimittas come, and then you're away. So quick and so easy, because the inspiration comes first. I do remember sitting in many places in the world where you know the Buddha had visited, or you know there's relics or something there, and you allow yourself to be inspired. You allow that energy to come up, and then when you start meditating, it is so easy. Even our own place in Bodhinyana Monastery, we have a hall there which has been there for maybe 38 years now, and over those years many great monks and nuns have sat there. It has got some real relics of the Buddha there. You know, some of these relics of the Buddha which people have in their temples. One thing which I would suggest, if it's at all possible for you, if ever you have some Buddha relics, please don't put them in a big pagoda so no one can see them. If you can actually see them with your own eyes, wow, that creates a lot of inspiration. The relics which which are on display in Bodhinyana Monastery, They came from a Burmese monk. I think he gave them, could have been in Thailand he gave them to me. I can't remember exactly where he gave them to me. But he explained, first of all, as a Burmese monk, he would go to up-country Burma, in the remote places. And then he would look for some of these old chedias which had been destroyed. The jungle had just taken over that area, and inside that jungle deep were these ancient chedias. I think you all know how much the Burmese Buddhists would build so many chedias. And he would inquire if any villagers had ever found any of these chedias. And he told me that in one village he heard that one villager had suddenly become quite wealthy. So he asked the villager, "Now how come?" Of course the villager wouldn't tell him at first, but eventually the villager confessed that while seeking for herbs or something deep in the jungle, he came across one of these destroyed chetias. And there he found a golden casket with some bones in it. He left the bones at the chetia. The gold casket he took to the market to sell. And that was where he got this sudden increase in wealth. And the monk just asked him, "Look, I'm not going to tell the police or confiscate anything, but please, can you take me to that place? I don't want the gold, I want those relics inside that casket." And so the villager took him there, and he collected many relics there. And then, after collecting them, he wanted to make sure that they were sent to places where they can be the most useful. And because I was doing lots and lots and lots of teaching and starting to get a reputation, he decided to send some of those to Australia. So he gave me a lot of these relics with the story behind them. Now, my problem was getting these relics through customs in Australia. You know that customs in Australia don't recognize monks. If it's importing things into Sri Lanka, for me it's the easiest thing in the world. When I landed at the airport here in Sri Lanka, I didn't even go through customs. They said, "Please, this way, sir." And I went into the VIP lounge. In the VIP lounge, they don't check your bags. They just can have your passport, you give the passport, they don't ask any questions, they just stamp it. But in Australia, it's so different. I had to write out a form, what was in my luggage. It was only in my bag. I had a bit more that time, because I had the relics. And I didn't know what to put down on the form. I had something to declare. And the only category which would fit, they didn't have a category for Buddha relics. The nearest, the closest which I could tick was human remains. And I ticked that, human remains. I was declaring them. So the customs officer said, "What human remains have you got? Can I see them?" And I took them out. I said, "These are bones." "Bones of who?" "Bones of the Lord Buddha." And straight away he looked at me. "This is too complicated for me." And he got the supervisor out, the head guy in the customs. And the head guy came out and said, "What are these?" "These are bones. Relics of the Lord Buddha." He looked at the bones, he looked at me, and he said, "This is too complicated, get out of here." It was not a biological hazard, so I was free to go. And those bones are in Bodhinyana Monastery. been there for many years. And that is why you can feel the extra energy there. But one of the things which we did do, I never hid them away. They're on display. So you could just go up there and have a look. And that is amazing, because that gives inspiration. That makes it feel real. And one of the things with these relics, this is not what I was expecting to talk about, but there was one of my other friends, one of the Buddhists from a long time ago living in Australia. Someone gave her 3 little relics of the Buddha. And she was Caucasian, but very devout Buddhist. She would worship them and do chanting and meditation every day. But when her husband left and she was by herself, she needed to do some maintenance work in her house, so she got a local handyman. And the handyman was doing something like painting the ceiling above the shrine, and not being very mindful that these were Buddha relics, he actually tipped the relic container over. And he just put it back again, but he never noticed that 2 of the relics had fallen on the carpet. In the meantime, the lady who owned the house vacuumed the carpet. And only afterwards did she find out she had 2 relics missing. And she felt terrible about that. She had been entrusted with 3 relics, and 2 had gone missing. When she inquired, only then did the handyman tell her he tipped over the relic casket, and only then she realized she'd vacuumed the carpet. Fortunately for her, living away out of town, everything which was vacuumed up went onto the compost pile. So she knew where those relics were somewhere, in this big pile of compost. And so for the next 3 months, she used a tea strainer. I think you in Sri Lanka know what a tea strainer is. When you make tea with leaves, not tea bags, the old-fashioned way with leaves, when you pour out the tea from the pot, you strain out the leaves in the tea strainer. So she strained all of that huge compost pile over 3 months, looking for the relics, which were in there somewhere. She found one, and she put it back in the casket, but the other one had vanished. She was sad. It's like you're entrusted with these things, and now you don't take sufficient care of them. So one day I visited her. She told me the story. And I asked her, has that relic come back yet? What do you mean, come back? I found one. I don't know where the other one is. So I asked her, can I please see your relic casket? She gave it to me in my hand, and I took the top off. Count. 1, 2, 3. It had come back. There were now 3 relics there. She hadn't put it back. I didn't put it back. I just looked. And that's one of the amazing things about these relics. If you do have confidence and faith and you're practicing well, you're keeping your precepts, they actually multiply or they return. And that gave us so much inspiration. And I hope it gives you inspiration as well. In the group where I teach in Singapore, I gave them a couple of these relics, And these were supposed to be relics of Mahamoggallana. And anyway, the people in Singapore, Chinese Buddhists, they were good Buddhists, intellectual. They did do some meditation and lots of kind works, but they didn't have so much faith in the Dharma, certainly not relics. I only gave them to them for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then they sent email back. Said, you only gave us 2 relics of Mahamoggallana. We put them in the cupboard, on display, locked up. There's now 3. They too saw these relics increasing, and that gave them extra inspiration and faith to make sure they practice appropriately. So when you have this inspiration, that really does something for the power in the place where you even meditate. Some years ago, a Chinese Feng Shui master came to look at our hall. I was not there at the time. No, because over in Perth, I don't care where you were born. You can come from any land or country, and if you're a Buddhist, great, you're a Buddhist, come in. And so these were the Chinese Buddhists, and they brought a Feng Shui master, and the Feng Shui master came into that hall. He didn't know much about, what was in there, but he said that that's got some of the strongest Feng Shuis ever seen, especially in the front. He didn't know why. Of course I know why. There's Buddha relics, and there's also the energy of many great monks and nuns who have meditated there. And to this day, anyone who comes on a retreat, our retreat center is the opposite side of the road to our monastery. But I still make sure I invite them. If you're meditating, maybe just one afternoon, go and meditate in the main hall in the monastery. And they do. I can't get them out of it. They like it so much, it's got energy. You can feel it. It makes the meditation so much easier. You're inspired. Now, I don't need to tell you to go to Australia. There are so many holy places here in Sri Lanka. If you can find some of those places here in this land and cross your legs and sit down, if they were quiet instead of being tourist places, if you could sit quietly there, sometimes you feel how easy it is to get this energy come up. You can watch your breath as easy as just listening to the bird outside. It's just right in front of you. And it develops into beautiful states of nimittas and even jhanas. Why? Because it's like you're feeling the energy of these great moments of the past. So that inspiration is something which is wonderful to use. I know that many Sinhalese ask me, is it okay to do some recollections of the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha before you start to meditate? Of course it's okay if you do it properly. Now, I don't mean by chanting Itipi So Bhagawa. You can do that if you wish, but do it slowly and understand what those words mean. They're powerful. And if you let those words just soak into your heart. You know that once, many years ago, that we used to do our evening meetings, and we should do the chanting of the 4 Brahma Viharas, spreading first of all metta, up, down, left, right, throughout the whole universe. And I could never finish that chant. I knew the words, but what happened? I got so inspired. If that's what that chant said, I would not just chant it, I would follow it. When it was saying, chant loving kindness, to the east, to the west, to the north, the south, up and below, in all directions, to all beings. I was actually doing what it was stating when I was doing the chanting. And you got so blissed out, you couldn't chant anymore. That's what happens with inspiration. And even some of the chants which you do, in things like even the Ratana Sutta, Kinang Puranang Nawang Nati Sambhavang. The old is destroyed, nothing new is being made. And those of you who said, how do you let go of the past? It's telling you that the past is destroyed. There's no more new things being made. Virata chitta ayatike bhavasmik. The mind is freed from future existence, from future bhava. Nibbante dira yatayang pradipo. It's nibbana, it's ceased. Or rather, it will surely cease, just like the flame of this lamp. Those things, when I chant them, when you know what they mean, wow, that just gives you so much inspiration. And if you want to know why monks do these chanting, why nuns do these chanting, and do they have power? You bet they have power if you know what they mean, and you remember what they mean when you're doing this chanting. These are powerful teachings of the Buddha. And if, they don't, you haven't got the spiritual power to make use of these amazing Dhamma teachings to create some happiness and well-being for others, heavenly beings do. I don't know if you have seen heavenly beings, heard them, or really believe they exist. But in my life as a monk, please remember I started as a theoretical physicist in Cambridge, scientist, a very, what they used to call hard science. Things like sociology was soft science. This was hard science. You had to be it was mostly maths. You had to be very logical. That's where I started off. Where I got my inspiration to know that heavenly beings exist was doing a test, an experiment. Because when I was doing charika, in Thailand we used to call it tudong, same thing. You have just all your possessions on your back and you just go walking wherever you need to go, and you'd have this umbrella and mosquito net which you put around the umbrella to protect you from mosquitoes and anything else which was looked upon you as lunch or dinner. And you could survive so well like that. I remember just going, this was so many years ago, almost 42 years ago. Thailand was not well developed yet, especially the northeast. And I went through a part of Thailand they call the Phupan Mountains. And as I was walking, I'd run out of water. It was a hot season. I hadn't seen a well or a river or any source of water where I could filter some drinkable water. And of course, because I was a Westerner, I wasn't used to the heat. And so I was getting very scared of dehydration and the problems which come from that dehydration. Sometimes it could kill you. And so I came to a ridge in one of the hills, and I saw in the valley below, not a stream, all the rivers were dry because this was the hot season. And I saw there was a small village of 5 or 6 houses. And I knew from experience in one of those houses there would be a general store. And in the general store they would be selling cigarettes, lighters, kerosene, rope, and also Coca-Cola. They all had that, no matter how remote. As a monk, you can't buy. As a forest monk, you can't suggest. But I thought, that would be wonderful if I could have just one bottle of Coca-Cola. I could maybe survive with that. But then I remembered a story about a famous forest monk who was walking between Burma and Thailand during the Second World War. I don't know if you know the situation there, but Thailand became an ally of Japan, and the British, my ancestors, were in Burma. And so if any of the British soldiers saw a Thai monk, they thought he was either a spy or part of the enemy. They would interrogate him quite harshly. It was very dangerous being a Thai monk at that time. You know, my ancestors did terrible things. Sometimes if I come to Sri Lanka, I come to Sri Lanka to pay off the bad karma of my ancestors. But no, that's not why I come here. But this particular monk was told, I know it's dangerous walking back to Thailand, but if you stay here it's more dangerous. And you cannot go by the main roads. You have to go through the forest paths, through the jungles. And because I spent some time up there, it was dangerous, you know, for jungle animals, but also those paths, they were so steep, up and down, and there wasn't that much water or food around, but that was the only choice he had. And he survived, but he told afterwards that when he was walking along those jungle paths, he was getting weaker and weaker and weaker. He hadn't had any food for days. There was no villagers up there. But he kept on walking, and he was getting so weak, he thought he's not going to make it, he's not going to survive. And then he remembered some of those stories from the suttas, how sometimes heavenly beings, devas, can help. So he made a determination, an adhisthana. He said, look, I'm a good monk. I've been practicing in Burma. I'm now going to Thailand. I keep my Vinaya. I practice. I don't break rules. So he said, if there are devas, can they help me? He made that resolution carefully. And then he turned a corner in the forest path. And he noticed along that path there was a gentleman standing with a tiffin can. You know what tiffin cans are? A little metal container, and then another metal container on top of that, another metal container over that, another metal container over that, with a metal band keeping them together. It's what people even here in Sri Lanka used to use when they went to work in the fields to carry food, or carry food to the temple. He had a tiffin can there, and he was well dressed. Not like you really see in the jungles, a long distance from anywhere. A man there, well dressed, holding a tiffin can, silent. And when this monk walked past, in Thailand when we go on alms round, we're not allowed to stop. We just keep walking until we're invited to stop. When you're invited to stop, we usually hear the words Nimon Krap. Nimon comes from the Pali word Nimantana, and Krap is just the honorific title. Nimon Krap. If you don't hear their word, you keep on walking. So this Thai monk walked past, and then he heard Nimon Krap. And so the monk stopped, opened his bowl, and the unbelievable happened. In this tiffin can was hot food. Temperature warm. Fresh, white rice. In the jungle you don't have white rice. You usually have potatoes, yams and stuff. They don't have rice fields up there. And very delicious curries. The sort you get in Bangkok, not even provincial centres. And this monk could not believe what he was experiencing. It is part of our rule in Thailand that once we're offered alms, we may give a blessing, but that's all we can say. You cannot ask where that man or woman came from. But this monk, he couldn't resist. He looked at this man in very good quality clothing, not rags. I don't know why he knew he was coming that day or where he'd come from. So he asked him, "Where are you from?" The monk hadn't seen a village in days. "Where are you from?" And this man never answered. He just pointed. Now that was the story as it was told. As a scientist, now he's making it up, he's exaggerating it. But I always wanted to test these ideas out. So on that ridge of the mountains, when I saw there was a village down the bottom, I knew one of those places would have some Coca-Cola. I said, I'm a good monk, I keep my rules. I'm on this ascetic practice of, called Dhutanga, just living so simply, not asking for anything. If there really are heavenly beings, I don't need a meal, but I certainly do need a Coca-Cola. A simple request. So I made that determination, saying, if there are devas, please, show you exist. And I walked into that village. When I was doing walking on alms round, I would always keep my gaze, like in walking meditation, just a body length in front of me. I remember doing one alms round in a town over in northeast Thailand many years later, actually years before. And then after I finished the alms round, the other monks said, "Did you see the Westerner put food in your bowl?" I didn't see a Westerner put food in my bowl. I never looked at the faces, just looked at the hands, put food in the bowl. I was actually that strict. So when I was walking through that village, I was not looking to the left or the right, up or down, just a body length in front of me. And then I could see out of the corner of my eye the general store. And I walked right past it, and no one stopped me. Heavenly beings don't exist. When I thought that, I heard someone running behind me and saying, "Nimon Krap!" And I realized why they hadn't stopped and said Nimon Krap immediately. It takes a while to open up a can of a bottle of Coca-Cola and put a straw in it. And there's this man had this open bottle of Coca-Cola and offered it to me. Now that could be just a coincidence. But what happened next was another lady ran up. "Nimon Krap." a second bottle of Coca-Cola. And then another man, a third bottle, a fourth bottle, a fifth bottle, a sixth bottle. You know what the magic number is in Thailand? A seventh bottle, an eighth bottle, a ninth bottle. 9 is a magic number in Thailand. They always really revere Rama the Ninth who passed away, because the 9, it means like progress. In Chinese cultures like Hong Kong or Singapore, 8 is a magic number. Thailand it's 9. And I sat there on a bench with 9 open bottles of Coca-Cola in front of me. There's no way in the world, no matter how thirsty I was, you could drink 9 bottles of Coca-Cola. So I just drank the top of each of those 9 bottles. And I gave the rest to the kids who were milling around. I think they knew they were going to get something. And from that day on, I never doubted the existence of heavenly beings, which will help good monks and nuns if you are a good monk and nun and you really need it. Those were inspirational stories, which I never accepted because I was born in a Buddhist country. You found out for yourself. But, oh my goodness, I'm going to go over time, sorry. But the next inspirational story was the very best. I know Prem, if he's listening in the back, he says every time he hears this story, it also makes him cry. It's inspirational. And I know the people involved in this. I know it's absolutely, accurately true. There was this American young man. He was working in the Peace Corps in Thailand. And when he was working in the Peace Corps, the end of his years of service in the Peace Corps, he thought it would be a wonderful addition to his experience overseas to ordain as a monk, as a bhikkhu, for a short time. I think you know one of the differences between Sri Lanka and Thailand. If you ordain as a bhikkhu here, it's for life. In Thailand you can just do 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. If you're very wealthy, you can just do a few days. Even I think the kings have to at least do 72 hours. They never call it 3 days. At least to have some sort of respect for the Buddhist tradition. So anyway, he was interested in becoming a monk. He didn't know how to do that. He was staying in a hotel. And he asked the concierge, how do you become a monk? It was the first time a concierge in a Bangkok hotel heard such a request for an American citizen. He didn't really know. Except the concierge did know there was one monastery in Bangkok called Wat Bawon, which sometimes had Westerners as monks. So he said, go there. Take some food. Give it to one of the monks on alms round early in the morning and ask that monk, I want to be a monk too, please help me. Not the best advice, but that's what this American did. When he went to Wat Bawon, it was really early in the morning, maybe 4 a.m. And there's hardly anyone there. All the doors, the gates into that monastery were all closed. And was walking up and down wondering what to do when this Thai man came up to him and said, what do you want? What are you doing? And this American said, I want to ordain as a monk. And this Thai man said, you come way too early. The place is all locked up. But this Thai man said, never mind. I can take you inside and show you around. So this Thai man got out a set of keys and opened this big metal gate. Both of them went through this metal gate, and then they went towards the main ordination hall, the Uposatha hall. And he turned on the lights, opened up the hall with another key. And on those Thai buildings, they have all of these murals, paintings. And these were paintings of like Jataka tales or other main events of Buddhism. It's like cartoons, except a cartoon goes from left to right and then the left to right. You can work it out from the chronological order. But the Thai method of painting goes up and down, here, there. You have to know the story to work it out. But this Thai man was so knowledgeable, and he was so interesting, all the things this Thai man said about the meaning of the paintings and who painted them and for what reason. It may be someone died of typhoid or of malaria, and this was an offering to them, to the temple, and the merits would go to the person who died. And the time went by so fast. And when they finished, this Thai man told this American, now is the time, go outside, I will lock up, and you go outside and there'll be an elderly monk come out of that door, offer him alms, and then ask your request to become a monk. And that's what this American did. And he was accepted in the training to become a monk. But I think many of you Westerners might have gone through this problem yourself. If you're getting ordination, sometimes the monk they give you to train you can't understand English that well. They can't speak English that well. So this is what happened to this American monk. The Thai monk they gave to train him, sometimes the American couldn't understand what he was saying. So he asked, can I have someone else to teach me all the methods and trainings which I should do? And they said, this is the best English-speaking person in the whole monastery. And that's when this candidate asked, what about that temple attendant I saw on the first day? What temple attendant? The one who opened the gate and took me inside the hall and explained everything to me. What? That's impossible. I know this for all the years I spent in Thailand. I've stayed at that temple. The gate they went through is called the Royal Gate. That's a royal temple. That particular gate, a big metal gate, the only people who could walk through there is the royal family of Thailand. Not even I am allowed to walk through that gate. This was impossible. They said, no layman has the key. So they took him straight away to the abbot of the temple, who later on became the chief monk in Thailand. And when the chief monk started listening to this, he stopped him. Said, please get the secretary. They got the secretary and they wrote it all down. This is now in the history books of that temple. I know that because when I think it was in Singapore, giving a talk in the Thai High Commission in Singapore. After telling the story, the ambassador stood up and said, I'm actually on the board of trustees of that temple. You're absolutely correct. I've read the story myself. It happened. So he started telling the story that no lay person has the keys to that gate. It's kept with the abbot, maybe a secretary. No one can open up the hall other than the abbot, secretary or somebody. And even the abbot did not know the stories behind those murals, at that time painted about 160 years ago. Is that about right? Maybe about right. So having told the story, that's when they asked this American, what did that man look like? And he said, well, he was wearing old traditional Thai clothing, not modern clothing. Yes, but what did he look like? And the American was about to say something like, well, Thais, they all look the same. What would I know? And then when the American was trying to think and describe, what this man looked like many sort of Westerners, we scratch our head and look around. And when this Westerner looked around, it was him. That was him. There was a painting, a portrait of him on the wall of the abbot's office. That was him. It was King Rama IV, the one of the main sponsors of that temple, the one who built it so many not hundreds, but so many decades ago. That was him. That's why he could go through the royal gate. In the previous life he was a king. That's why he knew so much about those temple paintings. He was there when they were painted. It was one of the cases of a heavenly being helping a young man become a monk. I don't know about you. I've told that story so many times. It inspires me. When you have those inspirations, that really helps you meditate. After I'm finished there, you've got to do the translation. If you're not listening to the translation because you can understand the talk in English, go and cross your legs and sit meditation somewhere. Allow that inspiration to power your meditation and take it deeper. I wasn't too long, it's only just past 5. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I'm sure you have many stories like that in Sri Lanka. Please let others know about them.